This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Everybody Lies Massive Late Fees House MD podcast, bringing you the best in episode-by-episode coverage of House MD.
.com.
Yep. So, this episode is entitled...
Histories.
Histories, mysteries. There's quite a mystery, sort of, at the heart of this episode. It opens with a woman who, she's clearly homeless, but she's going up to a home where there's a dude now, I guess, I don't think these are as popular anymore, but it's clearly a rave, and they found some abandoned house to stage their rave in, and they've got a guy standing outside. I don't know if this is the organizer of the rave or if there's more people involved or what, but they've got a guy, charging at the door, $20. And she obviously...
I think he's just like a doorman kind of guy.
Yeah, she obviously doesn't have any money. But do you think this is still a thing now?
I don't really know. I think one of my wife's coworkers said she went to a rave like a couple of years ago or something, but I don't know if that's a common...
Yeah, and I mean... I've seen them in clubs and things like that, but the abandoned house rave, I think that was more of a foreclosure time period thing.
Yeah, that'd be my guess.
But so she goes in there and she says she's looking for James, and she almost gets lucky. This woman comes up to her and she's like, "Oh, I'll help you find James. James is right between my legs." And she slips her a pill. She ends up collapsing. The police come to break up this rave, which, what did you expect was going to happen, honestly?
Right, which is very fortunate for her, because if they hadn't, who knows what would have happened.
Yeah, she got lucky.
That was kind of ridiculous. I think you kind of undersold that. Like this lady, like kind of like says she'll take him to the guy, and then she like just gives her like a full on kiss. But then like the homeless person, she spits out like 5 pills. Like, how many pills did this lady slip into her mouth?
Seriously?
And like then the lady who slipped the pills, like her girlfriend, like shows up and she punches the homeless woman in the face.
Yeah, it's quite a scene.
Really, I think about it, this is easily the most tragic character I've seen in House so far.
Oh, for sure, she is.
Especially when the end comes up, and this woman's just like shit on constantly.
But so the police come there and they take her to the ER. Wilson, who is James, by the way, James Wilson. He discovered, not the James she's looking for, but interesting coincidence. He stumbles upon her. She's has a twitch that he notices in her wrist. So he thinks that there's some sort of neurological problem. So he consults with Foreman, who's the neurologist. Foreman doesn't like her and apparently doesn't like homeless people, says she's faking, she just wants a place to stay. Homeless people are good for nothing. We might as well fucking eat them and murder their babies and eat them all. Jonathan Swift was right. And he says she has a seizure. Her insulin level is 38, which is really low. Yeah, go ahead.
And they did like a screen and they proved that she actually wasn't on drugs, which is what he initially thought. So he's like, she probably has some mental illness. She probably got prescribed Prozac and then like just never, filled the prescription.
Yep.
Like you said, she's got a super low blood sugar, starts to have a seizure. Yeah. And then she just forgets who she is.
He says that he bets that she'll have insulin. He gets her bag. And this is a funny thing because it shows a little bit of a difference between him and House, where he sees the bag, he smells it, it's putrid. So he's like, fuck it, I'm not touching it. Later, House does go into that bag. But he says, she this is what you should do. Give her a hot meal, check her insulin levels, release her. So Wilson comes to House and says, Foreman is wrong. He doesn't think anything's wrong with her, or he doesn't give a shit. He just wants to kick her out onto the street, and, I want her to get medical attention. House is fascinated by both things, by the fact that Foreman doesn't care, and that Wilson cares so much. So, and he wants to know why, so he agrees to take the case. He says she needs an MRI. She has, something's wrong with her brain. That's what Wilson thinks. So she needs an MRI. And
Yeah,
they don't.
he actually says, and this is kind of interesting. He goes, he says, he looks through her stuff and he tastes her vomit at one point,
Yeah.
which is I don't understand that at all. I mean, wow. But he's like, and House is very interested in like history of the patient. He's actually well known for this. In fact, in this episode, he's assigned to med students to teach them how to take histories.
Yes.
But he says, hey, she can't remember what's going on. She can't give us a medical history. So, House looks through it, and then after he tastes the vomit, he goes, oh, it might be an electrolyte imbalance. So he says, put a bag on her, and then, like basically observe her for like 12 hours, something like that.
Yeah. Get a banana bag, which is basically it's potassium and all this other stuff, all these other multivitamins basically to help balance your electrolytes and stuff like that. He says that her vomit tastes salty, so maybe it's an electrolyte imbalance. I don't know why you don't just take blood, because you can
Yeah.
you can see that in the blood. But he tastes her vomit and speculates maybe that's what it is. So they do that, and he says, hey, she's gonna need to get an MRI. I'm trying to remember how exactly, because Foreman's like, oh,
So what happened is she's like kind of like drawing the doctors.
yep.
Like, just like making those, and then Chase like tells, oh, Foreman doesn't really like me either. And then, but then she just flies into a rage while Chase is treating her, and she bites Foreman on the arm.
Yeah, just bites him right on the arm.
And then Chase is like, she doesn't have HIV or hepatitis. So, Foreman is actually pretty nonchalant about it. But since they want this MRI, like you said, because they want to rule, they think it's an ovarian cyst, I believe, at this point.
Not yet. They
Okay,
just
sure.
think neurological problem.
So they go to they need to give her an MRI, and when they go to give her the MRI, they point out that she has a metal pin in her arm, so
Right.
she can't do that. So they have to surgically remove it because House tells them that he's like, yeah, it might be a brain tumor.
Foreman thinks it's a brain tumor, and if we don't do anything, she's going to die. So we need to surgically remove this pin and then give her an MRI. So they do, and they give her the MRI, which is clean, and Foreman says, oh, so we just put this woman through surgery for nothing. And House comes in, and he's like, hey, it's not for nothing. And he like, let's look at her comic books. Maybe we can get some clues from there.
Yeah, because Foreman, even with a homeless person, he goes through her house.
Yes.
He gives his jacket to a homeless guy, and then she's got like this big binder full of papers. And there's also quite a few bats in this tent, which is kind of curious.
Yeah, they fly out.
Yeah, like you said, the MRI, they look at it and like there's nothing in the brain or head at all. But House says, yeah, I just want to take the pin out because he actually kind of like plays a little prank on him. He's like, oh, because they kind of figure out who she is. He goes, oh, let me guess, and he like gives a list of exactly what it is.
Yep.
But it's because when he took the pin out, they're all registered to like a certain company, and he was able to find out exactly who the patient was.
Yeah, in case of a recall, they're all matched. They all have serial numbers, and they're all matched to whatever patients and the latest information they have on the patients. So if there's a recall on anything in there, they can immediately get a hold of somebody and say, hey, that's got to come out, whatever. So,
So the various histories. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, they find out her name. They find out, basically the area where she's from. They also find out that she was in a bad car accident.
Yeah, and also they found out that she's allergic to one of the medications they're giving her.
Yes. Foreman took her off the banana bag because her blood work came back and she was fine as far as that goes, the balance goes, and he gave her something, I can't remember what it was for, but he gave her something
epinephrine.
else.
I don't know what that was supposed to. It's because of the allergies, I guess.
Yeah, but so yeah, has allergic reaction, so they give her the epinephrine, and they're finally able to stop the allergic reaction. Then they go through her medical file, because now they have at least some information on her. And Wilson points out, oh, they're looking for ovarian cancer. She had stomach pain. They're looking for ovarian cancer because he knows the doctor. Being an oncologist, he knows.
Yeah, that's right. He did know he did know the doctor.
He knows a lot of the other oncologists in the area, so he recognizes the name as an oncologist. And so they give her an ultrasound, and they find something
on her ovary.
Something on her ovary, and they're like, it's huge. So they're like, okay, well, if this is ovarian cancer, it's late stage ovarian cancer. And House says it's not cancer, it's a tuberculoma. She lives outside. She gets tuberculosis. She could have a tuberculoma.
And then at this point, House basically admits he's like, yeah, if it's a diagnosis that is like that's there's no hope. I'll just kind of make up something that it could also be in test for that. Like it's almost like a very optimistic way of doing that.
Right, because they're like because he's like get a biopsy and then start her on this and this antibiotic, and Cameron says, well, that's not the treatment for that's the treatment for a tuberculoma, because he's like, yeah, it's probably ovarian cancer, it's probably not a tuberculoma, and she's like, but that's a treatment for tuberculoma, and he goes, and the treatment for late stage ovarian cancer is what? Because
Right.
there is none, so it's like either do this or do nothing.
Right then, of course, this is intercepted by House having to go to clinic duty.
Yes.
And then basically when he gets there, he just like starts coughing all over everybody. He sleeps.
He's like, I'm too contagious to do this. So Cuddy, you're gonna have to, and he just kind of walks away. And that's when Cuddy saddles him with two women who are students who need to do histories.
Right.
So they come
And then
in.
the House has a.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say
say
they come in and they say, they took a history of somebody. They're reading him off. Like she hurt her wrist, and one says she was horseback riding, and she goes, no, she said that she slipped at a beach house, and he looks at them, and he goes, huh, interesting. And she's like, what room were they in? And they say the same room, and they're like, huh. And he says, well, it's she either is she what how much did she weigh and what color was her nose? That's what he says. And
Right.
she goes, I don't know, she was thin, and the other goes flesh colored. And he goes, well, she's either under 90 pounds or she has a red nose. And they're like, oh, what does she have? And he goes, no, that's not teaching, that'd be telling you. And he's like, oh, I can't say no to you two or whatever. And he takes a big medical book out and he says it starts with C and gives them the medical
Right.
book, and then kind of walks away.
Yeah, and then let's just we should do this all at once so it's not confusing.
Sure.
And then so like he comes with them later and he goes into the same room and he's kind of holding a clipboard in front of her. He goes, and how'd you hurt your wrist? He goes, oh, I banged it at the carnival. And then he turns and he shows the two women that he has a picture of a Ferris wheel on his
Right.
on his things. He goes, so he basically very abruptly goes like, yeah, this is she's got so and so. She has no memory. She's got this certain disease. You have to treat her for it.
Mm-hmm.
And when they come out, the woman's crying, and the one of the students goes, wasn't that especially cruel? He goes, no, watch this. And he just goes like and walks in by himself. And he goes, what happened here? He goes, oh, a grumpy old man with a cane did this to me.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, she has no memory. It's whatever. It's fine. She's had what the hell was it called? It started with a K though, not a C.
Right.
It was K. I can't remember, but basically, it's a thiamine deficiency from it can come from alcoholism or poor diet. Basically, not a it doesn't mean poor diet doesn't always mean like you're eating a bunch of fatty foods. It just means a non-balanced diet, because that's why she's super thin. She's whatever she's eating, she's not getting enough of certain vitamins that she needs, and she can't make new memories basically.
Sure.
But yeah, so that's he proves that that's what it is, which isn't really teaching them how to take a history, but I guess whatever.
Right.
So they, like the biopsy comes back and it is a tuberculoma. It's not ovarian cancer, but in the meantime, she spiked a fever of 105, which is not good. And
No, they like had to make. I didn't realize they actually did this. They just make a big bath of ice and just toss her in there.
yeah, sometimes that's all you can do to try to cool when it's an emergency like that. Yeah. Don't try that at home, anybody. If you've got somebody that's got like 105-degree temperature, go to the emergency room and let them treat them. But yeah, they do that sometimes, and because I've seen it in movies where they do it at home and stuff. But it's not.
Jacob's ladder.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not a safe thing to do at home because you can really hurt somebody. You have to be in a medical place to do it. But
Yeah,
this episode is significant for me because this is the first one ever where when I was watching it, I said, "Oh, I bet she's got this," and it was that.
nice. Also, we need to point out Foreman apologizes to the patient
Hmm.
because he didn't think she was sick,
Yep.
which House would never do. And then she also apologizes because she admits she took too much insulin on purpose to get
Hmm.
into the hospital.
Yep. She did want a place to stay,
Right.
but
So yeah, she got this fever, and then when she's getting the water in the ice bath, she goes, "It tastes like poison."
yep, and she spits it out. She doesn't want it. She throws it away. That was one of the big clues for me. And the light from the outside all of a sudden becomes super intense for her, and she doesn't
Right.
she doesn't want that in her face. So he turns all the lights off and everything. Slowly, as this episode goes on, he starts to see her more and more as a person, and um she runs off. She gets out, and Foreman's going to go outside to look for her. And Cuddy basically says, "You're a doctor. You don't go and search for people. You call 911, and then the police search for people, and then you treat people. That's how this stuff works. So don't be an idiot, and stay right where you are. We'll call the police." So they
I
do.
wonder what actually happened. I mean, did she just not get enough sedation? I mean, that's just kind of weird.
Well, so here's the thing. She got 10 milligrams of Haldol, I think, or something like that. And Wilson points out there is no way that someone just walks out after getting that much sedation. And Foreman says, "I gave it to her." It's very quick that they mention this in the final diagnosis, but this disease does cause an inability for pain relievers to work, which is especially cruel in what it does. So that sedatives basically don't work because of the stuff that's going on in the brain. Because spoilers, it is neurological. It basically blocks them from accessing the parts of the brain they need to in order to operate. So that's how she was able to just get up and walk out. But she walks out. Some cops find her, and she comes in and she's got a racing heart rate, like 155 beats per minute. Which they give her some Respirone to calm her heart rate down, and it goes down. So they're like, House is like, well, if this is tied into it, then I don't know what the fuck's going on. But he suspects maybe it's not tied into it. So he talks to the police officer and he's like, "Hey, that's a nice taser you got there. About 60,000 volts, right? Because that's what it would take in order to elevate her heart rate like this if you shot her with it." And because the guy's like, "Oh, I just found her lying on the grass in this park and everything." And eventually he bribes him with $100 to tell him, yes, he hit him with a taser. He hit her with a taser in the thigh first, didn't affect her at all. Hit her again, and that's what brought her down. So House starts poking around the thigh. She doesn't feel anything. Pokes her on her toe on her other leg, which she does feel. So it's not like it's an ascending paralysis, one side or anything like that. It's patchy paralysis. He knows what it is now. He takes a swab out of her mouth to to put in a thing to test, and at the same time he says, "Hey, that's where she bit you, huh?" He stabs Foreman in the arm when he's not looking. He turns. He's
I
like,
assume it was a different needle, but I
right,
couldn't tell.
right. He turns and he's like, "Hey, what the fuck?" And he's like, "Oh, you can't get mad because you didn't feel it." Turns out she's got rabies from
Yes.
the bats. Because that all that stuff adds up, and this is why, because I'd read about it before I watched this episode, just like coincidentally, but that's how I got it because she's got a temperature, so I was thinking, okay, fever, I was thinking infection then, and then in the same scene, like the photophobia and then the hydrophobia, the fear of light and the fear of water come out, and I'm like, oh, those are symptoms of rabies, and then I remember the bats, and I was like, oh, bats spread rabies, probably rabies, and that's what it turns out to be. And I didn't know that because of the mechanisms that it does in your brain that it causes sedatives to not work, but apparently it does, which sucks because there's like no relief for pain because it does cause nerve pain towards the end. I guess it's kind of painful. But once you start showing neurological symptoms like she has, it's obviously way too late. Foreman needs to get shots, which he does, so that he's okay. But
I guess in real life, though, Foreman actually would have been too late at that point if he can't
yeah,
feel it. It's progressing.
yeah, because if he can't feel anything, yeah, for sure, like he'd be too far gone. And I don't know how many days it's been, but it's been a while. So yeah, no good. And that's the other thing too. Once she bites him, it's like, oh, she doesn't have AIDS and she doesn't have hepatitis or whatever. And he's like, well, I'm gonna get a tetanus shot. Those aren't the only things she could have, though. There's like a ton of different infections that she
Right.
could have that could be spread through saliva contact like that. So they should have done more testing. Like in real life, he probably would have lived because in real life they probably would have got to this diagnosis faster. But but yeah, so she's got AIDS, or she's not AIDS. That's the other
Oh
episode.
no,
She's got
that too,
she's got rabies, and
and hemophilia, even though she's a woman.
right. And Foreman says he wants to find James for her because in all these cartoons, there's Mr. Fury, there's James, there's the bad guy, all this stuff. So they go to the house where the rave was. They find the door. They find. I mean, it's basically she draws them a map to it, and they find this box with pictures of her and her husband Paul, who's not James, Paul Furia, so Mr. Fury. They find out who James is. It's her little son. And what happened is in that car accident, they both died. She was driving. She broke her wrist, her arm. They both died. And then I guess out of guilt or she started taking drugs or I don't know, she ended up on the street. And kind of lost it because I mean, I would imagine it would be easy to lose it in that situation. So Foreman comes up to her, as she's laying down, she's looking away from him. She grabs her hand and she says, "James," and he goes, "No, it's Paul." And he basically says, "Hey, I came here to forgive you. It wasn't your fault." She starts, crying. She says, "I'm sorry," and everything. It's a very kind of touching moment between the two of them. And then we kind of end the episode with Wilson outside. So we don't really find out why Foreman doesn't like homeless people or why homeless people make him
Yeah,
mad.
they never explain that part at all. But like you were about to say, they do explain why
Mhm.
Wilson is so fond of them.
Yeah, we do later. Basically get the reason. Over time we get the reason why this is like kind of the beginning of it, why Foreman distrusts homeless people and stuff, because there's other episodes with homeless people or indigent people or whatever, and we get the idea later. But yeah, we find out why Wilson has sympathy for them. He's sitting down and House talks to him, and House I think kind of at this point figures out that someone he knows, Wilson knows, is homeless. So he's like, "I met your mom and I met your dad and I met your brother." And Wilson says, "I have two brothers." And he goes, "Oh," and he's like, "The other one I haven't seen." He's like, he basically goes, "This is the last place I saw him. 9 years ago. I don't know if he's alive or dead or what." And House says, "Well, why didn't you ever tell me?" And he's like, "Never seemed relevant or whatever." But then they kind of sit there. It's a nice friendship moment between the two of them. So Wilson has and Wilson's homeless brother comes back. I mean, not we never see him, but him as being talked about and as a character and stuff comes back a few different times throughout the course of the series. But this is the first time that we learn that Wilson has a brother who's on the street somewhere. But that's basically the episode.
Yeah, it was a good episode.
What did you now? They mention that there have only been a few cases of rabies. Like I think they say like 10 cases in the last 5 years or something like that. Because as they accurately point out, most of the time, if someone gets bitten by a wild animal, especially a mammal, because mammals are what carry rabies, then you're going to get shots. So whether because they don't test, they just they're
Give you.
yeah, they just give you the shots and they say, "Hey."
It's a real hassle to track the animal down and behead it.
Yeah, because that's what they have to do. Yeah, they have to behead it and track and test the brain. So yeah, they just give people shots and they're like, hey, if you would have gotten rabies, now you're not going to. So,
Right.
that's what they do. So yeah, they say that, there's like 10 cases or whatever. Um, I don't know if that's true or not, but I've got to imagine that rabies is fairly rare. I know that.
Yeah, it's on the scale of the website I use for reference. It was a 7 out of 10 for rarity.
Okay.
Like they said, only like 50 cases have been contracted in like 50 years, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly enough, at this time when the episode takes place, there actually was an uptick in rabies in New Jersey because I guess the raccoon population had exploded.
Oh, okay.
I mean, still, I mean, I can't imagine it was like, hopefully not people dying from it, just probably like, infections of it. And they said like
Right.
a doctor would actually routinely check for rabies at
Yeah.
that time period.
Yeah, I would think so. But
Especially a homeless lady with a bunch of bats in her tent.
yeah, that's the thing is bats spread it more often than most other mammals because
Yeah, most cases are from insectivore bats, like 60 something, 64%, I think.
yeah, I believe bats can carry it longer than most mammals. Like dogs or squirrels or things like usually they show a lot of outward signs, so people would stay away from them. Obviously, dogs, famously foam at the mouth. I believe squirrels do the same thing, and it kills them much faster, so they have less of an opportunity to do any kind
Spread
of
it.
damage. But
Probably less human interaction.
yeah, but I think bats carry it longer with no outward symptoms basically. So that's kind of why they
Yeah.
they spread it more.
As you know, in the book Cujo, the woman who initially gets it gets rabies from a bat.
Yep, that's right. But yeah, so that is the episode though. What'd you think, Mike, overall of this episode?
I liked it. I mean, I thought it was weird that Foreman and Wilson are just like speaking as if they're like like colleagues.
Yes.
I guess technically they are colleagues, but are like peers. That's the word I'm looking for because like they're just like shitting on each other, and like no one says, "Oh my god, what are you doing?" But it's just because
Yeah.
it's like his boss's boss. Well, maybe not. I don't think Wilson is like a direct chain of command, but yeah, he's a higher up at the hospital.
Wilson, so I don't know if Wilson is head of oncology at this point. At some point, he is head of oncology, but I think he is because he has the same office. So I'm pretty sure that at this point,
And he's got to be in charge because he does whatever the fuck he wants. He just goes
yeah,
and hangs out with like House and his like students for like episodes at a time.
yeah. So like Wilson is head of the oncology department. Obviously, it's a different department, but still, he's the head of a department in the hospital. And as we later learn, he's on the board of the hospital. So yeah, he very much has a like leadership role in this hospital. And Foreman is, I mean, Foreman's a doctor, but Foreman's a fellow. He's not like it's not like he's not even like a full department member necessarily. He's like a fellow of this department. So, like it's he's definitely below him for sure. But
Yeah.
I like Foreman a lot, and I like Wilson a lot. So
Yeah, they're fun, but it's just like obviously it's a fictional television program.
yeah,
But to think of it in real life, it's like I don't think that would happen.
no, I'm pretty sure that Foreman
But at the
would.
same time, you could say Foreman might be arrogant enough to do so because he definitely believes in himself, and if he thinks something's wrong, he's going to speak up.
Yeah, I suppose that's possible. And at this point, I don't know if he knows it or not, but at this point, he's pretty much got the protection of House. When he talks, it's almost like House talking because House is never going to get rid of him.
Right.
But yeah, definitely, I like both those characters. So the fact that they kind of focused on those two characters, I like this episode quite a bit. I think there's a lot of like little humors in the episode, and there's a lot of good character moments for Wilson and how or and Foreman in this episode. We learn a little bit more about their characters, so I think definitely another good episode.
Yeah, I like again how they're just kind of slowly like giving you the background of characters and not just like oh by the way how I used to do so and so and so. It's it's nice to kind of teach.
Yeah, one of the things that they do pretty well, because every once in a while they have an episode that focuses strongly on a character where you get maybe a good amount of information in one episode, and those are of mixed results, in my opinion. Some of them are good, some of them are, it's like a little bit too much, but for the most part, they do a really good job of slowly forming these characters over time. Like, I mean, we're still learning, probably well into like the third season. We're still learning more things about these, these background characters. Where, like, we have a good sense of their character before then, but we're learning even more stuff that kind of enriches and informs, more about them. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's really nice to watch.
But that is our episode for the week. Come back next week. Tell some friends about it. If you know anyone that loves House MD, still watches reruns, talks about the show all the time, thinks that they can diagnose your ailment, says, "Hey, have you been walking in tall grass? Maybe you got Lyme disease." Tell them to come and listen to this massive late fees. Everybody lies. We'll welcome them with open arms, and we won't alienate them. We'll talk about AIDS.
Exactly.
But that is our show for the week. We will see you next time. Bye.
See you next time.